next we have House Bill 1188. 1108. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get my electronic technology. No, but my fingers don't work fast enough on these iPads, and they don't update fast enough sometimes. Representative Burton, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for hearing this bill. I want to start out by just mentioning a couple things to you before I start this. You know, we as legislators come up with ideas for bills from time to time. And a couple of years ago, a group of ladies came to me that were parents, a group that were engaged in trying to expand recognition of dyslexia. And I learned quite a bit there. You know, and as any of you know, as legislators, you hear these discussions, and you get engaged a little bit, sometimes a lot, depending on what happens. And then afterwards, you know, we had a couple meetings. We talked about it. We talked about some legislation. I visited with the superintendent's office of public instruction about this. And then I had a town meeting last year. And you know how town meetings go. You get a big crowd. Well, I had one show up. That's pretty typical. And this one lady, her name was Cheryl Clemens. And this lady has a son with dyslexia, and they're going to testify as soon as I'm done. I'm hopeful I'll be next on the list to be able to talk. But anyway, she came in and we talked. We had plenty of time because there were just the two of us. So we had plenty of time during my town meeting to talk. And what's more important, and this is not political, this is something that I think that maybe many of you may have experienced around the state with these people. They engaged me, and they stayed engaged. And she came along with her son. They got involved in the political process, regardless of political, whether it's Republican or Democrat, and enthusiastically approached it because they wanted awareness of the opportunities that was available. Really got me fired up and, quite frankly, inspired me. And I learned a lot from these people. Let me just mention a couple of names to you before I explain this bill. Steve Jobs, Charles Schwab, Tom Cruise, Richard Branson, Jay Leno, Henry Winkler, Steven Spielberg. These people all have dyslexia. And they've been a tremendous success. However you want to gauge them, they've been tremendous success. This is not a sickness. This is just a difference in learning. And so one of the things that I was told, I don't know how true this is, a couple of years ago, that there was some question about whether they could even mention in the school system about dyslexia, that it might be discriminatory to say that because somebody's got something wrong with them. And I can see where in bureaucratic circles that kind of thing could happen. I don't know if that's a fact or not. But the bottom line is 1 in 5 children have some form of dyslexia. That's 20% of the population. And so what my bill does is very simple. It simply creates a vehicle for identifying dyslexia, and teachers being able to get the certification, if you will, and the formal education to identify and experience this and treat it properly. This young man is going to go up and talk here in a few minutes. He's really been quite an inspiration to me because he's very sharp, he's young, but he's very sharp, and he enthusiastically embraces this stuff. How many of you have seen somebody that was very shy, a child that was very shy or back off, or somebody that's rebellious, and you wonder, why are they that way? Well, maybe there's something wrong that bothers them. Maybe they think they're dumb because they think differently. They're not dumb. And so I think this legislation is important. It's been an inspiration to me, and basically that's what it does. It's real simple. It defines dyslexia for the purpose of teacher licensing, requires an individual who seeks to receive initial practitioner's license as an elementary school teacher to demonstrate proficiency in recognizing the specific learning disabilities related to reading, including dyslexia. And that's it. Ready to answer any questions?
Any questions for Representative Burton? Representative Smith, I would remind the committee and also those testifying that we have a timeline and that we have to be in House session at 10 a.m. and we've got 30 minutes.
10, so 30, 10.
We go in at 10, I believe, this morning, yes. Representative Smith?
Yes, 2 questions, Representative Burton. On page 2, it talks about demonstrating proficiency. I believe in your bill. I just don't want to put another hurdle in that will prevent us from attracting teachers into the field because we're projecting a shortage. And so I'm just saying that, it's just a concern that I want to put a pin in that because we come up with a major proficiency test and it becomes a hurdle that concerns me. But I do feel that it's an area that should be looked at when we start talking about meeting the needs of all the students. So that's just one concern. And the other thing that I have concern about is what about students who transfer in at a higher rate level? They may come out of the state. They may have been in a parochial school, and then they come into a traditional K-12 setting, and they're not at the elementary, but you still got to meet their needs. So why are you restricting this to elementary?
Well, you have to start somewhere, and I think the key thing is that the intent of this bill is to catch it at a very young age when they're coming in, whether it be preschool or whether it be kindergarten, identifying it. Because as you know, the young children's minds are like sponges. In the first 5-6 years, they learn more than they probably do in the rest of their life, and so you want to appeal that. Are there separate situations like you're coming up with? Absolutely. I don't have a solution for all those. I just know that when you see somebody out here that's different, they're not dumb, they're not sick, they just think differently, they should be afforded the same opportunities everybody else. And that's really what I'm working for. So, and as far as the qualifications, the certification, this comes under, and you're going to hear about this from the superintendent's office. There's some legislation, some things about REPA 3. They'll probably discuss that with you a little bit, and I'll let them talk about that. Discuss that. But I think it's an identification thing more than anything. It's being able to identify young people that have some kind of a difference in that area, and then addressing it. Because once it's addressed, these people usually are pretty sharp.
Representative Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really don't want a whole lot of discussion. I just want to make some comments, and then we can talk about this later because I think it's important. As people, teachers, it doesn't matter elementary, junior, or high school. They all need to have this understanding that children learn a different way. And so, people who are coming into high school first time, these kids are going to, some of them are not identified even by that time, so they need some help. I'd like to see it be more, if we're going to do this, all levels should have it. I know that when I did my master's, that's what I worked my master's on, was learning disabilities. And at that time, you had to start going immediately. If you got a teaching license, you had to start immediately, go working on that master's degree. And I felt it was very important because I understand that everybody's minds work differently, left brain, right brain, that sort of thing. But anyway, I would like to see it really more for all teachers. But my concern is, back when we did a bill for Governor Daniels' credit creep, we said that universities shouldn't go beyond the 120 credit hours for the bachelor's. So I want to double check that and make sure that this is not going to force these universities to do that. And so maybe somebody that's from the university can talk to me afterwards and talk to you afterwards, because we are at a time limit. But I think we need to double check that.
You and I had a little discussion about this briefly, and I think it's a good point. I think what you're going to see here as we move through this, we try to get this program implemented, but through the educational process of teachers over a period of years, this will probably integrate into the higher grades through this REP3 program, which I pleaded to. I'll let Barnes explain or talk about that to you. But yes, but you got to start somewhere, and I think delay is not the answer. The idea is to move forward. Let's identify this.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, I want to make sure that two individuals that came here to speak for the public definitely have an opportunity to go first. So, Cheryl Clemens and Joshua, I don't know if you want to come up together or separate, but want to come up and share your thoughts for us, please.
My name is Joshua Clemens, and I'm a sophomore in high school, and I am dyslexic. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of House Bill 1108. I struggled to learn to read in kindergarten and first grade. By second grade, I was really far behind. It didn't take an ivory test to see that. My teacher told my parents that I was capable of reading, but I just didn't want to do it. She would send papers home that I had trouble reading and wrote in big red letters, "Joshua refused to do this." Teachers often identify kids like me as either lazy or slow. The other kids in the classroom also label kids like me as dumb. We are often picked on and bullied. Everyone seems to have a label for us whether or not the school formally labels us or not. It wasn't until my parents took me for outside testing that I began to understand that I am dyslexic. Since dyslexia isn't recognized in Indiana, the school needed to wait until I was significantly behind so I could qualify as having a specific learning disability. The label specific learning disability includes many different types of disabilities, including brain injuries. Dyslexia requires a specific type of intervention so that students like me are actually able to close the gap. Without the dyslexia label, we only receive interventions that are appropriate for a group of disabilities, but never receive interventions that are specific for dyslexia. I am fortunate because my parents have been able to pay for Orton-Gillingham tutoring. Orton-Gillingham is a multi-sensory intervention that uses systematic and explicit phonics and has been shown to be a successful intervention for many dyslexics. I increased 2 grade levels in only 7 months of tutoring. I think that training teachers to recognize dyslexia will help students get the right help. It'll help them so others won't misunderstand them. I knew I learned differently and was frustrated because I couldn't learn the same way as my peers. The word dyslexia gave me the confidence that I could achieve success. Training teachers is a good first step. Thank you for your time.
Any questions for Joshua? I want to compliment you on your presentation and your thoughts. You've done a very good job, and we appreciate and we're sorry that we weren't able to help you at an earlier age. Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joshua, great job. Just one question. This is kind of personal. Do you consider dyslexia a disability for you, or just you learn different?
I more learned.
That's what I'm thinking too. We need to adjust how we teach, not how you learn, correct?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much, Josh. Cheryl, would you like to add some thoughts as well? That's fine. Go ahead. You got the stage.
Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak in support of House Bill 1108. My name is Cheryl Clemens, and I'm one of the leaders of a group called Decoding Dyslexia Indiana. We are a grassroots movement of families across Indiana seeking to raise awareness about dyslexia. I'm also the mother of 3 dyslexic children. It shouldn't be too surprising because according to the NIH and the Yale Center for Dyslexia and Creativity, dyslexia affects 1 in 5 children. Unfortunately, less than 30% of these children are identified, and far fewer receive the interventions they need to be successful. Currently, unlike other states across the country, dyslexia is a word that's used in most of our schools. Even more surprising is that most schools lack teachers trained in the identification and then intervention of these children. My children have been very fortunate, are doing well, because we've been able to afford the $55 an hour Orton-Gillingham tutoring twice a week. In fact, my oldest son just completed his master's degree. You see, these are very bright children and have average to above average intelligence. Sadly, though, this is not the experience of most children in Indiana. If only we could redirect some of the money we spend testing and retesting these children to find that they're still behind and use it towards training teachers and providing meaningful multisensory interventions using systematic and explicit phonics. Teachers want training, and they want to see the children in their classrooms succeed. House Bill 1108 would bring us closer to ensuring the success of the 1 out of 5 children who are dyslexic. It has the potential to completely change lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate both of you coming down and sharing your thoughts. Are there any questions? Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ma'am, the method that you sought out,
Yes.
it was effective on your children.
Yes.
Okay. Was that at a private school or tutors or?
There's actually, within Indianapolis, Dyslexia Institute of Indiana has tutors. It's $55 an hour. When I saw the difference that it made in my own children, I went and I got training, and so I tutor, but I tutor for free because for children who can't afford that. But it's hard to find tutors trained in.
But according to your personal experience, this would be a system that would be relatively easy to implement. Or
Definitely. I'm tutoring a student now that was reading early kindergarten a year ago, and he's reading Magic Tree House books, 3rd and 4th grade level right now.
do you have any professional training as a teacher?
I am not. I'm a chemist. I worked at Lilly for 13 years.
So this is a system that you relatively easy picked up on and was able to teach and show progress, and is pretty cost efficient and done on a scale.
Yes, in fact, there's a pilot that's happening at the IPS schools that are using Orton Gillingham. Not sure if you're familiar with that, but the data's been phenomenal, and now they're also working with schools in Bartholomew County. You can look into that process.
Thank you.
Representative Rhodes?
I appreciate what you've been doing to help children with dyslexia. I appreciate that. I was a teacher, and I would try to identify children, and I would go to the learning disabilities teacher and say, what kind of test can I give? What can I do? They said there isn't a test. But I knew there was a problem. And one little girl I remember particularly when we were having a conference with Mother, she went home and talked. I said, I think she's dyslexic. Her mom went home and was talking to Dad about our conference. And he admitted, I'm dyslexic, but he had never told his wife. He never told anybody, because you are closet dyslexic because you feel there's something wrong with you. Dyslexia never goes away. You can't fix it. You can't medicate it. But you have to deal with it, and that's what he did, and that's what I told her. You let your husband help her learn with her assignments, because he learned how to cope, and you just have to learn to cope. It's because you're seeing things differently in a reversed order or whatever. So if there are now ways to be able to detect that, that's great. And schools should be able to do that for us and help us, and I didn't really get that help, but I knew there were students, and I would talk with their parents. So thank you for helping out.
Representative Arrington?
Well, one comment. My son-in-law is dyslexic. He's an engineer, so it hasn't totally kept him from being successful.
Dyslexics in engineering.
But will the method you've talked about help adults
Yes.
as well as children?
Yes, they tutor adults as well. I know a tutor that was tutoring someone in their 70s to learn to read.
My other question is, once you've started on this system, about how long does it take someone to get to where they catch up, if they're children?
I mean, I think it depends on the child and the severity of the dyslexia. But remember, these children are average to above average IQs. So my personal experience is it's very exciting because within that year they just made tremendous growth. Now, unfortunately, because we don't intercede until past 3rd grade, they're that much further behind. So if you can identify them in kindergarten, you've seen them in your class. So if you started then, your child would never fall behind. So my youngest son, well, because I had the experience of 2 other children, we started intervention before kindergarten, and he benchmarked his end of the year reading goal for this year at the beginning of the year.
Representative Smith?
Yes, first of all, I'd like to commend you for what you've done and for bringing this information to us. I have a couple of questions. My first question is, how many hours, how many days, or how long of a course did you experience in order to become proficient?
To take my Orton Gillingham training?
Yes.
Okay, so it was a 2-week class, 8 to 5, and then I did observations with a master teacher, a teacher that would watch me, look at my lesson plans, make sure I was delivering it correctly. And I believe I think it was such a 26-hour course. Now, what you need to do for intervention in a kindergarten level is much less than somebody, say, at 4th grade level.
This bill indicates that the teacher must, in order to get a license, must demonstrate proficiency. Do you feel like they need to demonstrate proficiency, or that they need to be exposed to it and be able to identify? Because many school corporations have special needs teachers, And I'm just saying, do we need the same kind of proficiency in the classroom? Because if we're going to say that, and for MIMH, MIOA, MH, ADD, we have people who are proficient in those areas that provide the service. So do you think the language needs to be changed in the bill to say they recognize, or do they have to demonstrate proficiency?
Depending on what you're talking about, proficiency.
And that's my concern.
If the proficiency in the intervention, definitely every teacher should be able to recognize dyslexia and know that that child learns differently, needs to be learning in a multisensory way. The training that's required for a first grade teacher is going to be very different from what's required for a high school teacher.
Okay, Representative Smith, I think if you look at it, though, they have to demonstrate proficiency in the recognition of it, not necessarily in the teaching of it.
Oh, okay.
So that if you look at it, exactly, that it talks about in terms of recognizing it, not necessarily teaching strategies to overcome it. So it really meets your point of issue. And so the bill actually speaks to that. Representative Austin, did you have a question? Representative Cook.
Could probably be incorporated in current programming they're doing within especially their reading instruction aspects for elementary teaching license.
I think teachers really need to go into a classroom because they're faced with 5 children in their classroom and they don't know why they're not moving forward.
I will say I'm personally acquainted with this also. I have a nephew who's an attorney and operates with dyslexia and inversion of D's and B's and B's, and a financier master's degree program student from the University of Illinois. Is a nephew who's in Chicago practicing finance right now. So they can be very accomplished students, and with minimal assistance in instruction, very, very successful.
I'm so concerned about children in areas that they can't afford this tutoring, and there aren't teachers trained within their schools because they just slip behind.
Thank you very much. We very much, so there's no further questions. We appreciate you and your son both sharing your unfortunate, you've made success out of it. We appreciate your circumstances and sharing with us. I'll take one more, and I think we're going to have to break and come back. I'll take Mike Leppard. Hopefully he can be concise and...
Mike Leppard from Taft Stettinius and Hollis Rome here on behalf of the ARC of Indiana, and Kim Dodson sent her regrets. I'm here to speak for her today. She wants to thank Representative Burton for his work on the bill last year, and we're supportive of the bill. Strongly support efforts to help identify issues that are impeding students' progress, and I think that the language specifically that you're talking about is exactly what we want to see, the identification of the diagnosis. We think it will specifically help kids receiving special education services that may not have yet been diagnosed. So with that, we urge your strong support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions for Mike? Seeing none. I think we're going to go ahead and recess, and we'll come back upon